أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The hadith for today that we want to reflect upon and read and hopefully understand is from the commander of the faithful, Imam Ali, may God's peace and blessings be upon him. And in this tradition, he talks about things that which us as believers need to keep away from. Now, obviously, there are many things that we need to be aware of and keep away from as believers. But the commander of the faithful lists multiple things in this tradition, which each and every one of us need to think about deeply and see how it is that we can implement his statement within our lives. In this tradition, the commander of the faithful says the following: it behooves the intelligent one to protect himself from the intoxication of wealth, the intoxication of power, the intoxication of knowledge, the intoxication of praise, and the intoxication of youth, for each of these have foul odors that take away the intelligence and reduces the dignity. Imam Ali, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, in this tradition shows us things that we as believers, men and women, young and old, need to keep away from, need to be aware of within our lives. And really a lot of these, if not all of them, are some of the things which cause the greatest evils and harms and corruption within any society. He starts off by talking about the intoxication of wealth and that we need to be aware of it and protect ourselves from it. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't seek wealth, that we don't attain wealth, but rather we keep away from the intoxication of wealth. When somebody gets so rich that they are drunk with their wealth, so to speak, that it changes their attitude, it changes their persona, it changes their character, just as alcohol changes a person's character. Sometimes money can do the same thing, that we develop pride and arrogance and a very unhuman qualities within ourselves. When people get that wealth and they don't couple it with true faith, with that love for Allah and the Messenger and for the needy, then that wealth which one was seeking can become actually a form of losing his own self-worth. The second thing the Prophet says is the intoxication of power. And as we have the saying in English that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Unfortunately, we have people within our society, within our communities, who are megalomaniacs, meaning those who are power-hungry individuals, whether it be at a governmental level, in a local, in a provincial, a federal, or whether it even be within a religious community or even within a family. Power is something which, if not coupled with humility and humbleness and submission to the rules of Allah, has the ability to corrupt an individual to the worst of levels. And we have many examples in the Quran and in our own history to see this in front of our very own eyes. The third thing the Prophet says, which is interesting, is the intoxication of knowledge. And you would think, well, how can knowledge, corrupt or intoxicate somebody? And it's clear that sometimes when people think that they got a bit smart, they learned a few things, that brings them to have power, arrogance, and they tend to think that they know everything because they've learned one or two things. Whereas we see that true knowledge actually should humble an individual. We have the saying from our scholars where they say that knowledge becomes actually the greatest of veils between a servant and Allah. Again, because sometimes people learn one or two things, we Google something, we read something on the internet, we heard a lecture, we read a book, and that knowledge gets to our head rather than to our heart. And we think, well, now I know something, so I can go in and brag and show, rather than using that knowledge to actually get us closer to Allah. So the next part of the hadith, as the Prophet says, is that keeping away from the intoxication of knowledge. He then goes on to mention the intoxication of praise, that there are people sometimes who love to be praised. They don't do things, they maybe delegate things to other people, but they want to take the credit for whatever happens within a family, a community, a society. And that, heaping of praise on a person, sometimes it actually acts as a barrier. It is a form of intoxication when people are there praising you and patting you on your back and saying, good job, and you develop an ego and a pride over this sort of an attitude. Last but not least, the Prophet says that the Imam Ali, peace be upon him, says the intoxication of our youth. when a man or a woman is of a young age, and I won't define young here, but when we see that we're at a certain age of our youth, we think we're invincible. We think that we are superhumans, so to speak, and that nothing can affect us. And so we let our youth sometimes get the best of us. We, again, use it in negative ways rather than in the positive ways that Allah would want us to use our youth in. And the Imam concludes this tradition by telling us that all of these things let off a foul odor. This is obviously at a metaphysical realm, not in a physical plane and time of space, but rather in a metaphysical realm. And he says that these things take away our intelligence and our dignity. So as believers, young and old, we need to keep aware of these things and keep away from them if we wish to climb the ladder towards spiritual proximity to Allah and to His favor and to get closer to the Imam of our age. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.